I woke before sunrise in the canvas tent that had become my home, and my hands were already aching before I moved them. The space beside me was cold. It had been cold for 3 weeks, 21 days since I'd buried Thomas on the hill overlooking this valley. He'd loved so much. I made coffee the way I'd learned to make it alone bitter. Strong. Without sugar. I'd forgotten to buy sugar 3 towns ago. Forgotten sweetness was even possible. Maybe 1 cup, 1 plate. 1 woman talking to ghosts in the pre-dawn dark. Today, I'll get the north wall to shoulder height, I said to the grave marker on the hill. Thomas didn't answer. He never did anymore. The coffee burned going down, but I welcomed it. Pain was honest. Pain meant I was still here, still trying, still lifting timber that felt heavier than grief itself. Maybe it was grief. Maybe grief had weight and texture and splinters that worked their way under your skin until you bled. Without noticing, I pulled on my work gloves leather, worn thin at the fingertips, and walked to the partial cabin walls. Standing skeletal against the lightning sky, 3 weeks of work. The structure was taking shape the way Thomas had drawn it that winter before the fever came. Before everything ended and somehow kept going anyway. The first log of the day was always the hardest. My shoulders screamed as I lifted it, positioned it, checked the level. For 1 split second, I almost turned to ask Thomas to brace the other end before reality crashed back like cold water. There was no other end, no other hands. Just mine, blistered on top of blisters, shaking with effort. I counted each log like prayer beads. 1, 2, 3. Numbers were easier than thoughts. Thoughts led to questions I couldn't answer. Why him? Why now? Why did I survive when he didn't? Numbers just led to the next number. The smell of pine sap stuck to my hands. The morning cold made the wood slippery. My own breathing was the only sound for miles, that and the occasional cry of a hawk overhead. Circling. Looking for something alive? Probably. Wasn't much alive out here. Just me and my monument to a dead man's dream. Because that's what I was building. Wasn't it not a home? A monument. A way to prove Thomas's death wasn't meaningless. That his dream could survive, even if he couldn't. Cold comfort. Monuments. They don't keep you warm at night. Don't answer when you speak. Don't tell you it's going to be all right. I'd stopped praying weeks ago. Started talking to dead men instead. Wasn't sure which was more futile. By mid-morning, my shirt was soaked through with sweat despite the October chill. I paused to drink water from the canteen. And that's when I saw him, a rider, on the distant ridge. Just sitting there, watching. My hands shook as I lowered the canteen. I'd been alone long enough that even distant observation felt like intrusion, like someone had walked in while I was undressing. I pretended not to see him. Went back to work. But I was aware of him the way you're aware of a splinter small. Persistent. Impossible to ignore. He was still there when I stopped for the day. 3 days the rider appeared on the ridge. 3 mornings I tracked his presence, while pretending not to. While my skin crawled with awareness. I considered keeping my rifle within arm's reach. Didn't. But considered it. Men didn't just watch widows from ridges for no reason. They either wanted to save you or claim you. And I wanted neither. I'd learned that frontier widowhood meant being either pitied or propositioned. Both made my jaw tight. The 4th morning, he rode down. I stopped working when I heard hoofbeats, stood straight, wiped my hands on my skirt, tried to look capable and unwelcoming at the same time. It's a look you learn. He was older than I'd expected, maybe 40. Weathered in that way men get when they've spent more time with sky than ceiling. He moved with careful deliberation, like someone who'd learned not to startle skittish things. His horse was well tended, despite his worn clothes. A man who took care of his animals might be trustworthy. Might be. Something you want to say? I asked when he'd been studying my work for a solid minute without speaking. My voice came out harder than I'd intended. "Your notching's going to leak come winter," he said. Heat rose up my neck. Men who thought women couldn't build, couldn't manage, needed saving. I'd met my share. I know what I'm doing. He nodded. Didn't argue, didn't condescend. Just kept looking at the cabin structure like he was reading a book. "I can teach you proper technique," he said finally. "Fair trade for a decent meal now and then." I'm camped 2 miles south, passing through till spring. Could use the company of someone who's not a horse. I wanted to refuse. Every instinct said refuse. Accepting help felt like admitting Thomas's dream was too big for me alone. That I wasn't enough. That I couldn't. But he was right about the notching. I'd known it for days. Ignored it. Pretended gaps didn't matter. Pride was one thing. Freezing to death in a leaky cabin was another. "Name's Jacob," he added when I didn't respond. He didn't ask about Thomas, didn't offer condolences, didn't look at me with that particular expression men get around widows, part pity, part calculation. Just waited. "Why?" I asked. Something shifted in his expression. Had a daughter once. Would have wanted someone to help her if she needed it. Had past tense. I heard the shape of loss in that single word. Recognized it the way you recognize your own language in a foreign country. "One lesson," I said. "Just one." "One lesson," he agreed. I watched him ride away and realized I'd spoken more words in 10 minutes than I had in 3 weeks. Wasn't sure if that felt like relief or betrayal. Both. Maybe. The way most things felt lately, like two truths that couldn't coexist, but did anyway. That night in my tent, I lay awake longer than usual, listening to night sounds I'd gotten used to. Tried not to think about why a simple conversation with a stranger had unsettled me. Tried not to notice I was thinking about it anyway. He arrived precisely at dawn. I'd been awake for an hour. Stomach nervous in a way I couldn't name and didn't want to examine. I'd washed my hands twice already. Checked the work area. Made fresh coffee, even though I'd already had some. "Morning," Jacob said, dismounting. "Morning." The lesson began in awkward silence. He showed me the proper angle for notching. Explained the physics of why corners failed under weight. His hands were steady, competent. Mine were shaking slightly, and I hated that he might notice. "Try it," he said, stepping back. I picked up the tool, got it wrong. He showed me again his hands guiding mine once. Professional, impersonal, but I still flinched at the contact. He stepped back immediately. Let me practice alone. Third attempt. I got it right. "Good," he said. Just that one word. But warmth spread through my chest. Pride. I told myself, just pride in work. Well done. Nothing more. He tied a brace of rabbits to my porch rail. "For the meal," he said. "I'll make biscuits." We ate in silence that felt heavier than the work had. I'd forgotten how to make small talk. Forgotten how to sit across from another person and share space without Thomas there to fill the quiet. Jacob didn't try to fill it either. Just ate with quiet appreciation. Drank his coffee, thanked me. "I'll come back in 3 days," he said as he was leaving. "Your corner joint's going to fail under weight next. Best to fix it before you build higher." I should have refused. Should have said one lesson was enough. Instead, I nodded. After he left, I practiced the notching technique for another hour, getting it perfect. Caught myself wishing he could see this one. It was my best work yet. Then caught myself wishing and felt guilty for wishing. For wanting anything beyond this solitary mission I'd set myself. That evening I stared at the cabin walls in the fading light. They looked different somehow. Less like burden, more like possibility. I didn't know what to do with that feeling. I noticed I'd set 2 places at the table before he'd arrived that morning. Had stared at them in near panic, almost put one away. Left them set instead, telling myself it was just courtesy, simple courtesy, nothing more. But that night, I slept better than I had since Thomas died. Dreamed of voices instead of silence. Woke before dawn, wondering when 3 days would pass. 6 weeks later, I stopped tracking time in days and started tracking it in visits. Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Jacob arrived at dawn, and we worked until early afternoon. The cabin walls were nearly complete. Something else was being built, too, though I didn't have words for it yet. We'd fallen into comfortable silence. Not the heavy silence of my grief, but something easier. The kind of quiet that meant we didn't need words to coordinate movement. I'd reach for a tool, and he'd hand it to me before I asked. He'd lift a beam, and I'd be there to brace it. Like we'd been working together for years instead of weeks. I started noticing his small kindnesses. How he arrived earlier on days when heavy lifting was needed. The herbs he brought for my blistered hands, showing me how to make a salve. The way he never mentioned my mistakes, just quietly demonstrated a better method. One morning while waiting for glue to set, we actually talked beyond logistics. He asked about the land, why here Thomas wanted cattle. I said, saw this valley, and said the grass would be perfect. He had this way of seeing what things could become. My voice cracked on become. Jacob looked away, giving me privacy to compose myself. It was a kindness that, looking away, most people stared at grief like it was something fascinating. He sounds like he understood vision. Jacob said after a moment. He did more than I gave him credit for. Maybe later. Cleaning tools. Jacob mentioned he'd had a daughter. She'd be about 12 now. Past tense, would be. I set down the rag I'd been using. Met his eyes. Fever. 2 years ago, her and my wife, Sarah, both. 3 days. I'm sorry. So am I. We didn't say anything else. Didn't need to. I understood the shape of his silence now. Same shape as mine. Just different details. 2 people who'd learned that life doesn't pause for heartbreak. It demands you continue or quit entirely. I'd stopped thinking of him as the stranger. He'd become Jacob, the man who taught me that wood has memory, that joinery is patience, that silence can be generous instead of empty. I caught myself humming one afternoon while working. Couldn't remember the last time I'd made voluntary sound. Jacob glanced over, almost smiled. Didn't comment. I was grateful for that too. The next Monday, I found a small wooden bird on my porch rail wings spread, detailed enough that I could see individual feathers. He'd never mentioned whittling, never mentioned staying up to carve things. I kept it by my bedside, touching its wings sometimes before sleep. I realized I'd started wearing my better shirt on his visiting days, started making extra biscuit dough, started counting the hours between his visits, though I told myself I was just tracking work time. Lies, my self answered, but they were comfortable lies. Autumn was changing the light, making it slant gold through the cabin's gaps. Soon, there wouldn't be gaps. Soon the cabin would be finished. I didn't let myself think about what happened after finished. So one afternoon, we reached for the same tool simultaneously. Our hands brushed. We both froze just a heartbeat. Then he handed it to me with a small smile. Something shifted. Not earthquake big, just a settling, like a building finding its foundation. "You've learned well," he said. I had a good teacher. It was the first time either of us had acknowledged what we were beyond two people building a cabin. Student and teacher, work arrangement, whatever safe labels we'd been using to pretend this was simple. That evening I watched him right away, counting the hours until Friday, 48 hours. Too long and not long enough at the same time. I picked up the wooden bird, studied its spread wings, wondered if he'd meant it as metaphor. Permission to fly again. Permission to want something beyond survival. The thought terrified and thrilled me in equal measure. The first hard frost came early in October, sudden and mean. I woke to disaster the canvas covering my winter lumber had blown away in the night wind, and the wood supply was soaked through. I stood looking at the scattered timber, feeling something close to despair. Weeks of careful preparation ruined. Without dry lumber, I couldn't finish the cabin before real winter hit. Without a finished cabin, I started dragging logs toward the barn, trying to salvage what I could. The task was overwhelming. Logs everywhere, some already showing signs of rot. I'd need to sort, assess, restack. Alone, always alone. Tears came without permission. I'd cried exactly once since burying Thomas at the graveside. Briefly, before forcing myself back to stone. Now the tears wouldn't stop. Frustration, exhaustion, the sheer weight of doing everything alone. Hoofbeats. I wiped my face fast, tried to compose myself. Too late. Jacob saw everything, the scattered lumber, my tear-streaked face, the way my hands shook. He didn't say a word, just dismounted and started hauling logs to the barn. We worked all day, sorted by dryness, checked for rot, restacked. The work was backbreaking, but his presence steadied me. Not because he took over, he didn't. He worked beside me, let me make decisions, followed my lead on organization, but I wasn't alone. That made all the difference. By evening, we'd salvaged most of it. I made supper rabbit stew, biscuits, the last of my potatoes. We sat across from each other in lamplight, exhausted. "Thank you," I said. "You'd have managed alone." But I didn't have to. He looked at me then, really looked. "You've been managing alone for a long time, haven't you?" Even before. Something cracked in me. Not breaking open, like ice on a river when spring comes hard. I started talking. About Thomas's illness. How quickly he went from fine to gone. About the guilt. Why did I survive when he didn't? About the exhausting performance of frontier strength. How everyone said I was so brave, but I wasn't brave. I was just too stubborn to quit. There's a difference. Jacob listened without interrupting, without offering platitudes or solutions, just listened. When I finally stopped, ran out of words, he was quiet for a long moment. "Sarah would have liked you," he said. "She always said the strongest people are the ones who admit when they're breaking." What happened to them? He told me. Fever swept through their town 2 years ago. Took Sarah first, then Emma 3 days later. He'd buried them both. Left the house they'd made together. Started writing. Thought if I kept moving, grief couldn't catch me. Did it work? No. He smiled sadly. Grief doesn't chase you, it walks alongside. I've been learning to make room for it instead of running from it. We sat in silence, but it was different than before. Sitting across from him in lamplight, I felt less alone than I had in months. It terrified me how good that terror felt. "We're the same, aren't we?" I said. "Two people trying to outlast what can't be outlasted." Maybe. Or maybe we're two people learning that continuing isn't betrayal. When he left that night, he hesitated at the door. "Watching you build this cabin, teaching you, working beside you, it's been the first time since Sarah and Emma that I've felt like I had a reason to wake. Up in the morning. Just wanted you to know that." I didn't know how to respond. Just nodded. Throat tight. After he was gone, I stood in the doorway, watching his lantern disappear into darkness. One hand pressed to my chest, where my heart was beating too fast. Like I'd been running. Like I was still running. Mid-October brought the first real storm. Sky turned green-gray by afternoon, and the wind started testing everything it could move. The roof beams were up, but not secured yet. If wind got under them, weeks of work would scatter across the valley. I looked at those beams and felt panic rising. Jacob arrived as the first raindrops fell. We didn't discuss it, just started working, securing beams, bracing supports, racing weather and failing light. Rain soaked us within minutes. Wind fought every effort, trying to tear tools from our hands. I climbed the ladder to secure a beam on the north corner. It was heavy, awkward, started to slip. Jacob was there instantly, hands bracing the beam, guiding mine to the right position. I feel how it wants to sit. I felt it. Felt how our movements coordinated without words, instinctive as breathing. The last beam secured just as full dark hit. We stood in the half-finished cabin, rain drumming on the partial roof, soaked and shaking from exertion. Jacob laughed. It surprised us both. A real laugh relief. Triumph. The surprised sound of survival. I hadn't heard him laugh before. It transformed his face, made him look younger. I laughed too. Couldn't help it. We stood there like fools, laughing in the rain and darkness, giddy with exhaustion and victory. "We did it," I said. "You did it. I just helped." "No, we..." Something passed between us in that moment. An acknowledgement, a shift from you and I to something else entirely. Jacob built a fire in the stone hearth, our first fire in the cabin. We dried off, shared coffee. The space felt different, with fire crackling, rain outside, warmth inside. Less like construction site. More like shelter. More like home. "Storm's still bad," I said eventually. "Barn's got dry space if you want to wait it out." He accepted. We spent the evening on opposite sides of the fire, talking until sleep took us. About his childhood in Missouri, my father's farm back east. Dreams we'd had before grief taught us not to dream. The conversation wandered like a river, finding its own path. I woke at dawn to find him already up. Fire rebuilt. Coffee ready. Small domesticity that felt enormous. Outside, we inspected the cabin together. It had held perfectly. Standing beside him, surveying our work, I thought I built this with him. Not for Thomas, with Jacob. It didn't feel like betrayal. It felt like the first honest thing I'd done since spring, late October. And I woke to panic. I couldn't name. I'd set 2 places at the table without thinking. Had been doing it for days, maybe weeks. When had that happened? When had my space become our space? In my thoughts, the cabin was nearly finished. Jacob would move on soon. That was always the arrangement. Passing through till spring. He'd said, but spring was months away, and I'd already started imagining no. I couldn't let myself imagine. Couldn't let myself need. I'd barely survived losing Thomas. If I let myself love again and lost again, it would destroy me. Better to be alone than risk that pain. Safer. I built walls that morning faster than I'd built the cabin. Except these walls were made of fear, and I could feel them crumbling even as I raised them. When Jacob arrived, I was cold, distant, worked without talking. What happened? He asked after an hour of silence. Nothing. Sarah used to say nothing the same way. Usually meant everything. I put down my tools. The work's nearly done. You've fulfilled your end of our deal. There's no need for you to keep coming around. I can finish the rest myself. He went very still. Oh, what are you really saying? I'm saying I want my space back. I'm saying this was Thomas's dream, and I need to finish it the way it was meant to be. Mine alone. Lie. Complete lie, but safer than truth. Jacob studied my face. I looked away. All right, he said finally. Started gathering his tools. I wanted him to argue, wanted him to fight. Instead, he just moved, methodically, packing up. At the ladder, he stopped, turned back. I want you to know these months, working beside you, teaching you, watching you bring this place to life. It's been the first time since Sarah and Emma that I've felt like I had a reason to wake up in the morning. His voice was steady, but his hands shook slightly. If you need me to go, I'll go. But I hope you're not sending me away because you think moving forward betrays his memory. He'd want you to live, not just survive. Then he left. I stood in the nearly finished cabin, and the silence was deafening. That evening stretched into the longest night of my life. I looked at everything he'd touched, the perfect notching, the solid joinery, the wooden bird on the windowsill. This cabin was ours. We'd built it together. The we of it was woven into every beam. I thought about Thomas, really thought about him. Maybe for the first time since the burial. He'd wanted me to build a life here. Not a monument, not a shrine. A life. And life meant more than just surviving. I remembered his last lucid day, how he'd made me promise to finish the cabin, to build the life they'd planned. Don't stop living because I do. He'd said, I'd thought he meant keep going. Now I wondered if he meant keep growing. Keep opening, keep trying. My mother had said once, the dead don't need our suffering. They need our joy. It's how we honor them. Yeah, I'd been so afraid that moving forward meant leaving Thomas behind. But standing in that finished cabin alone, I realized he's not in this structure. He's in my memories, in my heart. And there's room for both. Room for what I had and what I might have. I made coffee at dawn. 2 cups. Stared at them. I could pour one out and reclaim my loneliness. Or I could ride to Jacob's camp and ask him to come back. Not as teacher, not as hired help, as partner. My hands shook as I saddled my horse. The ride to his camp felt like riding into battle 2 miles that stretched forever. Dawn cold made my breath mist. My hands trembled on the reins. I'd rehearsed words, but they scattered like leaves in wind. His camp was half packed when I arrived. My heart dropped. He was leaving today. I'd almost lost him through my own fear. He looked up, saw me. Surprise and hope and guarded pain crossed his face in sequence. We stood 10 feet apart, breath misting in the space between us. All my rehearsed words disappeared. What came out was raw truth. That cabin we've been building, I keep calling it mine. Thomas's dream. But that's not what it is anymore. My voice shook. Every beam you helped me place, every lesson you taught me. Every evening by that fire, we built something new. Not Thomas's cabin. Not mine. Ours. He didn't move. Didn't speak. Just listened. I was so afraid that moving forward meant leaving him behind. But standing in that finished cabin alone last night, I realized he's not in that structure. He's in my memories, in my heart, and there's room for both. Room for what I had and what I might have. The words kept coming. Faster now, like a dam breaking. I don't know what this looks like. I don't know if I'm brave enough to love again, but I know I don't want to finish this life alone. I know I want more mornings with coffee for 2. I want to keep learning from you, to keep building with you. Not just the cabin, everything that comes after. Silence. Just wind in my racing heartbeat and the terrifying space between us. Then Jacob spoke. Voice rough. I came west to escape ghosts. Thought if I kept moving, kept busy, I wouldn't have to face the empty spaces they left. But watching you these months, your courage to stay, to build, to continue even when it hurt, you taught me something. He stepped closer. Grief doesn't disqualify us from joy. It just means we understand how precious it is. Another step. I would be honored to help you build whatever comes next. To try again. Together. I closed the distance between us. Took his hand, the same hand that had guided mine on that first notching lesson. That had braced the beam during the storm. That had carved the wooden bird. Then come home. I said, let's finish this cabin. Let's see what else we can build. His fingers tightened on mine. What are we building? Everything, anything, whatever we're brave enough to try. We stood there in the dawn cold, hands clasped, breath mingling. I felt Thomas smiling somewhere. Not betrayed, freed. We were both freed. I was so close to losing this. I said, to losing you, to choosing safety over everything that makes life worth surviving. You didn't lose it. You rode through fear to get here. That's braver than never being afraid." We packed up his camp together, loaded his horse. The domesticity of it struck me how natural it felt, how right. Riding back, we crested the ridge, and the cabin came into view. Walls strong, roof weatherproof, chimney trailing smoke from the fire I'd left burning. It looked different now. Not monument, foundation. "Welcome home," I said as we reached the cabin. He smiled full, unguarded, transformative. Welcome home. 2 horses at the rail, 2 coffee cups still waiting on the porch. The wooden bird in the window, wings catching morning light. I looked at him and felt something I hadn't felt since before hope. The real kind. The kind worth the risk. We spent that day finishing the interior together, hung the door, installed the last window, made the cabin complete. But it wasn't the completion that mattered. It was the continuing, the choosing to build more than just walls. That evening, first fire in our finished home, Jacob said, "Tell me what you want to build next." "Garden in spring, cattle by summer, maybe expand the barn." "Sounds good." "What else?" I looked at him across the firelight. "A life. A real one. The kind where you don't count days by how many you survive. The kind where you count them by how many you live." He reached for my hand. "Then let's build that." People sometimes ask me about finding love again after loss. They speak in hushed tones, like it's slightly shameful, as if my heart had a capacity limit. As if choosing to try again means I loved Thomas less. But here's what I learned. Grief doesn't disqualify you from joy. It deepens your capacity for gratitude. That first winter together, Jacob and I finished the cabin interior. We hung shelves, built furniture, sewed curtains from fabric I'd saved. When the first real blizzard hit, the cabin held perfectly warm and weatherproof, every joint solid. We spent long evenings by the fire, reading, talking, planning spring planting. I taught him my biscuit recipe. He showed me how to tan hides properly. Small exchanges that built into something larger. Partnership. Home. Spring came and we planted the garden together. Neighbors started coming by, first curious, then accepting. I noticed how people saw me differently. Not poor widow Thomas left behind, but Sarah and Jacob who run the place up the valley. I liked the new version better. Summer brought cattle. Thomas's dream realized, but expanded. Improved by Jacob's knowledge of livestock. The ranch began to thrive. Not despite our partnership, but because of it. Now, working beside Jacob on the barn expansion, I watch him measure timber with the same careful patience he showed teaching me notching that first day. I think about everything we've built, not just structures, but a life, a partnership, a second chance at family. Every morning I wake grateful, not just for Jacob, though I am, fiercely, but for the whole unexpected gift of continuing. For learning that starting over doesn't erase what came before. It honors it. Thomas gave me the courage to come west, to dream of building something from nothing. Jacob taught me that you can start alone, but accepting help doesn't diminish your achievement. It multiplies it. Sometimes the thing you're building cabin, ranch. Life becomes the foundation for something even greater than you'd imagined. You just have to be brave enough to let someone help you raise the walls. I look at our land now, cattle grazing, garden thriving. Smoke curling from the chimney of the home we built together. 2 coffee cups on the porch rail every morning. The wooden bird still in the window. wings spread toward sunlight. We built this life one choice at a time, one log at a time, one brave morning at a time. And every single beam holds firm. Sometimes at dawn, when I watch Jacob check the cattle, and I stand on the porch of the cabin we built together, I think about that widow lifting logs alone, talking to ghosts, building walls against feeling anything ever again. I'm grateful to her. She brought me here. But I'm more grateful I learned to set down that loneliness, to pick up partnership instead. This is what Thomas would have wanted. Not a monument, but a life. Not just survival, but joy. Not a widow frozen in grief, but a woman who loved enough to try again. Jacob comes back from checking the herd, sees me standing there. What are you thinking about how we got here? Regrets? Not a single one. He kisses my forehead, pulls me close. We stand there watching the sun rise over land we tend together, over the life we're still building. Ready for breakfast? He asks. Ready. We built this, all of it, together. And I'd choose it again, every single time.